Most people asking Rottweiler or Doberman for protection are already thinking about it wrong. They want the scarier-looking dog. They want the one that'll make the UPS guy hesitate at the gate. And I get it. That's a real consideration. But protection isn't about fear factor. It's about what happens at 2 a.m. when something is actually wrong, and whether your dog has the instinct, the nerve, and the physical capability to do something about it. Those are three different things. And these two breeds split them up in ways people don't talk about honestly. I'll tell you up front, I have a bias. My uncle in Karachi kept a Rottweiler for about 9 years, a male named Bruno, roughly 52 kilos at his heaviest. And that dog genuinely saved his family from a break-in, not by biting anyone, just by existing loudly in a hallway at midnight. The intruder left before anything escalated. But I've also seen Dobermans work, and the difference between the two is almost philosophical once you start paying attention. So let's actually get into it. The Rottweiler is old, not old like established breed old like Roman army cattle driving old. These dogs were bred to herd livestock and then guard the money pouches their handlers tied around their necks on the way home from market. That's the origin of the Rottweiler, a working-class dog with an almost instinctive distrust of anything that feels off. They don't need training to feel protective. The protectiveness is already there, sitting underneath the surface like pressure. Males run 50 to 60 kilos. Females 35 to 48. That weight matters in a real confrontation. Not because size guarantees anything, but because bite force and stopping power are physical realities. A Rottweiler has one of the strongest bites of any domestic dog, around 328 pounds of pressure per square inch. That's not a number I'm throwing out for drama. It's the number that determines whether a dog can actually hold a resisting adult male in place, which is the actual protection scenario people never think through to its conclusion. Here's what nobody tells you about Rottweilers, though. They're slow to act. That's not a flaw. It's actually the thing that makes them reliable. A Rottweiler assesses. It watches. It doesn't explode at every noise or every stranger who walks a little too fast past your fence. There's something almost deliberate about them. My uncle's Bruno would sit perfectly still for 30 seconds just watching a new person before deciding how he felt. That patience is trained out of some lines through bad breeding, which is a real problem. And I'll come back to that. The Doberman is a completely different animal. Literally. Carl Friedrich Louis Doberman, a German tax collector who needed a personal protection dog in the 1890s, bred this dog on purpose for personal defense. He crossed Rottweilers, German Pinschers, Greyhounds, and probably a few others depending on who you ask. The result is a dog built like a distance runner who also lifts. Males sit around 35 to 45 kilos, significantly lighter than a Rottweiler, but fast. The Doberman is genuinely fast in a way that changes the calculus. Where a Rottweiler is a wall, a Doberman is a missile. And that distinction actually matters for families. A Rottweiler is more physically imposing, but a Doberman will react faster. It'll cover ground faster. It'll get between you and a threat faster. European working lines, particularly Czech and Slovak-bred dogs, are known for this explosive reactivity, and when channeled correctly through Schutzhund or protection sport training, they're almost unsettlingly capable. A well-trained Doberman at full speed covering 10 meters is not something a person processes quickly enough to do much about. Now here's where I complicate everything I just said. The version of these dogs you'll actually encounter at a breeder, especially if you're not specifically sourcing from working lines, is probably not the dog I've been describing. The Rottweiler has been extensively bred for show in the United States and parts of Europe, and a significant portion of that breeding has produced dogs with calmer, more family-friendly temperaments at the expense of protective instinct. Same with Dobermans. The American Doberman and the European Doberman are so different in drive and nerve that some trainers treat them as practically separate breeds. If you buy an American Doberman from a backyard breeder who doesn't know what working lines means, you might get a dog that's loving and anxious and slightly neurotic, which is a great dog for some households. Not what you wanted if you wanted protection. This is the conversation that gets skipped every time someone makes a Top Guard dog breeds video. The breed tells you the potential ceiling. The breeding tells you where that individual dog actually sits. Health is another thing worth being blunt about. Rottweilers get hip dysplasia at a troubling rate. Studies from the Orthopedic Foundation for Animals put them among the top 10 breeds for hip problems. They also have a well-documented vulnerability to osteosarcoma, a bone cancer that's aggressive and often fatal. Average lifespan is 8 to 10 years. That's short, and it matters if you're building a relationship with a dog that you expect to protect your kids for a decade. Dobermans have their own problem, dilated cardiomyopathy, a heart condition that affects a substantial portion of the breed, and it can kill them young and without much warning. Average lifespan is 10 to 13 years, slightly better than a Rottweiler, but the cardiac issue is genuinely serious and worth understanding before you commit. Both of these dogs need more than a yard and some kibble. A bored Rottweiler destroys things, not out of malice, out of intelligence with nowhere to go. A Rottweiler that isn't mentally and physically engaged starts making decisions on its own about what's worth reacting to, and those decisions aren't always calibrated the way you'd want. Dobermans are even worse in this regard. They were literally designed to be alert, reactive, and constantly engaged. Left alone in an apartment for 10 hours a day, a Doberman becomes a problem. Separation anxiety, destructive behavior, sometimes redirected aggression. If you have kids, both can work. But I'd push back on the idea that either is automatically a family dog without serious investment. Rottweilers are naturally more tolerant of children, that herding and guarding instinct extends to the kids in the household in a way that can be genuinely touching to watch. A well-socialized Rottweiler with kids it grew up with is one of the more reliable combinations in the working breed world. Dobermans bond deeply but more selectively. They tend to pick a person, not always the whole family. That can create friction. The honest verdict: if you want a dog that will deter, that sits visibly in your space and signals to anyone paying attention that your household isn't worth the risk, Rottweiler. If you want a dog with the athleticism and speed to actually intercept a physical threat, respond faster than you can, and cover ground, European-line Doberman with proper protection training. The Rottweiler is the better choice for most families, most living situations, and most people who don't have the time or experience to manage a high-drive working dog full-time. But I'll say this: the dog that actually protected my uncle's family wasn't trained in Schutzhund. He didn't have any formal protection work. He was just a Rottweiler who loved his people and found something wrong in his hallway at midnight, and he handled it exactly the way he was supposed to. Not by biting, not by escalating, but by being 52 kilos of certainty in a dark corridor. Sometimes that's all it takes. The question is whether you've put in enough with either of these dogs that they'd actually be in that hallway with you when it matters, instead of cowering in the bedroom because nobody ever gave them a reason to trust their own instincts.